Monaco 64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're still waiting for people to come online. Just started this live stream earlier than usual, but yeah, I need to do it earlier than usual. Still no viewers. Hopefully they'll come on soon. Talking about the Federal Reserve. The title is Federal Reserve Global Broker at Large. So Sergio Senna, evening from St. Andrews. Yeah, nice to see you again. Billy's here for the live stream. So yeah, what do I mean by the Federal Reserve being a broker? Well, I'm reading an interesting book that I found out about recently. I should have probably read it ages ago, by Anthony Sutton. It's called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy. And I'll put the link here on the live stream for you guys. Here's the link. And I will put it also, the link to this in the description below when the live stream is recorded. So people are starting to come on now. So Rick, hi, good evening, Rick. Karen, Swiss Secret. Hi, Karen. Are you in Switzerland? Yeah, Billy's always on top of things. He's it's a bit cooler this evening here in London. What a shambles. Oh, yo, Mario, pumping cable here. Well, cable is not doing very well, is it, at the moment? I think the low today has been 130. Right now, it has rebounded. It's still down 50 pips. Gold has rebounded. We got down to 12.21. Silver as well has rebounded a bit. So, yeah, I want to talk about the Federal Reserve because I was reading this book called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy by Anthony Sutton. And the link I put there, you can read it for free. And I found an interesting comment on page 23. And if you bear with me, I'll read it out to you. And it's from a comment by Andrew Jackson, right? And he says, the framers of our Constitution were too well aware of the corrupting influences of a great moneyed monopoly upon government to legalize such a corrupting monster by any grants, either express or implied in this Constitution. And he goes on to say, bank corporations are brokers on a large scale. And could it be really urged that the framers of the Constitution intended that our government should become a government of brokers? If so, then the profits of the national broker's shop must ensure it to the benefit of the whole people and not of a few privileged moneyed capitalists to the utter rejection of the many. So that's what Andrew Jackson said. And I think the Federal Reserve is a broker on a large scale, on a global scale. And even though I'm not an American, I grew up in Brazil, I live in the UK, I think unwittingly Americans have allowed the Federal Reserve to be an instrument of plunder, not only plundering the United States, but the rest of the world. And I think that needs to change. Hopefully, President Trump is for real, unless something happens to the Federal Reserve in the next 2 years or in the next 6 years if he wins re-election. I would say he's part of the globalists, unfortunately. So let's see if we've got any questions here. Hi, Bob. Bob Anderson from Minnesota. What a shambles. Cable broke the trend line and swung in the reversal zone. Let's see. Love the channel. Thank you, What a Shambles. Clown with a Twitter account. Hi, Clown with a Twitter account. Why is Goldman seeking to prove a rise of profits? Why Golden is seeking to prove. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are the Rothschilds who pushing the crypto for kind conspiracy? I'm not sure. If the Rothschilds are pushing cryptos, maybe they just see it as an opportunity to make money. I'm not sure if they're involved in it. Havoc's Shorst. So the government gave the Rothschilds the printing press to borrow them fiat money. Yeah, I mean, it's a real, how can I say, it's a really warped, parasitical, how can I say, mechanism. So the Congress, was manipulated to and fooled into voting for the Federal Reserve Act on Christmas Eve, 1913. And basically, what we have now, we don't have constitutional money anymore, which should just be gold and silver. And basically, what the Federal Reserve does, and the banks, the private banks that run the Federal Reserve, they print money out of thin air based on national debt that is carried by the taxpayers of the United States, not only of the United States, but of the whole world, because the whole world is on the fiat money system. So the bankers, they create all this money out of thin air, and they get real goods for it. They inflate the debt away. They inflate the money away. So the poor cannot protect, the general public cannot protect themselves. And that's why we have such a huge inequality. And there's the comment from Thomas Jefferson, another founding father. Of course, Andrew Jackson wasn't a founding father, but in this book, the Federal Reserve Conspiracy by Anthony Sutton, he quotes Thomas Jefferson, the famous quotation, and I'll just find it here and read it for you. So this is what Thomas Jefferson said. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers occupied. The issuing power of money should be taken from the banks and restored to Congress and the people to whom it belongs. I sincerely believe the banking institutions are more dangerous to liberty than the standing armies. So that's a great way to put it. Thomas Jefferson, of course, now the founding fathers are considered right-wing extremists, while socialists and authoritarians are considered the good guys, right? And why have I become so kind of obsessed, I would say? And I don't think being obsessed about something is a bad thing, but why have I focused on this fiat money, on inflation? Well, because I grew up in Brazil. I was born in 1964, and I had a pretty good childhood. I was lucky, one of the lucky ones in Brazil, but I could see all the poverty around in Brazil. We always knew, and I always still know, that Brazil is a big country. It's bigger than the United States, without counting Alaska. It's a rich country. It's got a lot of land, resources, but we've got like a huge amount of poverty. And I never understood. We always had a lot of inflation, and people just didn't ask questions. And that's why I've always been kind of, how can I say, obsessed or interested in the question of money. Why is the money in Brazil worthless? And why is it becoming worthless in other places as well? And I came across, gold, sound money, central banking. And I even learned a few years ago that the CIA, of course, they engineered a coup d'etat in Brazil, a military coup, in 1964, which was the year I was born, right? And then they also, and then I found out that the Central Bank of Brazil was created on December 31st, 1964. So you kind of wonder, is it a coincidence? CIA, uh, military coup in Brazil, the previous president that they got rid of, he probably didn't want to create a central bank because he probably knew, Brazil would be at under the thumb of the bankers. So they got rid of him, right? Coup d'état. They put in a central bank a few months later, and now Brazil is always considered. My father told me, Brazil is always the country of the future. Theodore McIntosh is saying Brazil is geographically disadvantaged for global trade. Maybe, but Brazil doesn't really need to trade too much because it's got everything. So I think it's more than that. Brazil suffered, of course, a lot in the late 19th century when the Suez Canal was opened, because prior to that, a lot of the trade and travel from Britain and Europe to India and the subcontinent, they had to stop in Brazil, in Rio, to reload and to take supplies. But then, with the Suez Canal, they could bypass Brazil. But I don't think that's the reason why. So let's see. So that's what I'm talking about today a little bit. I think, all the deep state in the U.S. now, and that includes the CIA, the Federal Reserve, they're not the friends of the American people. They're the friends of the globalists, the people in charge, the bankers, the big corporations, and they've been wrecking the world for the last 100 years. Yesterday, for example, I didn't realize 17th of July was the 100th anniversary of the assassination of the whole, the whole of the czars, the Russian czars' family, him included. The Bolshevik communists basically took them down, to the basement of where they were imprisoned and just shot them dead, right? And if you read some of the same man who wrote this book I'm talking about, The Federal Reserve Conspiracy, Anthony Sutton, I highly recommend you guys Google Anthony Sutton and look at all his books. He wrote a book, Wall Street and the Bolsheviks. Wall Street financed apparently 2/3 of the Bolsheviks who went to Russia to foment the revolution. They were from the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So financed by Wall Street. Another regime change. They tried to do a regime change as well in the Ukraine a few years ago, but President Trump, he knows about these people, I think. And that's why I think the deep state is so upset about President Trump trying to negotiate with Putin. I think I said President Trump about the Ukraine. I meant President Putin, right? So they've done regime changes everywhere. They get, and the way they do the regime change, they get friendly with the people of those countries and the leaders, like they did with Gaddafi, and then they stab them in the back. Saddam Hussein. Am I saying all these people are saints? No, but that's how they do it. Penn Meister, Anthony Sutton is a super researcher. Yeah, I agree. I'm surprised. I've listened to him interview in the past quite a bit, and I'm surprised I haven't covered him more. I think we need to. He was born in the UK, but I think he lived most of his life in the US and became a US citizen. And I think he was born in 1925 and died in 2002. Clown with Twitter account. Who's the deep state? Bezos and Washington Post? No, I don't think that's the deep state. The deep state are people way above Bezos. They're the people who control the Federal Reserve, the people who, the establishment, people who probably never heard of. They're people who have gone to, part of Skull and Bones, Harvard, Yale, Axis, all these people there. Bezos is maybe, he's high up there, but he might be, kind of a minion, I would say. Uh, Rich Winslow, I keep hearing, even from top hedge fund managers, that the event is coming. Mario, what do you think this event will be that will start the chain reaction? Um, Difficult to say, Rich. I remember in 2007 and 8, I knew the system. Back then already, I knew how corrupt the fiat money system was, but I had no idea it would be the subprime sector that would trigger it. Difficult to say what's going to trigger it now. S. Walker, Powell said to ignore a yield curve. Of course, the Federal Reserve, though, they don't want, and they also probably trying to tell people to ignore quantitative tightening because it's just like watching paint dry, right? So, Zalatiki, how can we price gold other than dollars? Well, it's like asking how can you price money in dollars. Gold is money. You price it maybe in how much you can get from it, the purchasing power, and look at, consider gold and silver as ounces or grams. Look at it as ounces or grams. The federal, the dollar, technically gold really doesn't have a price in dollar because the dollar is really a weight of silver and gold according to the Constitution. Hi, Johnny Ringo, nice to see you. Your boy E. Why isn't the stock market falling? Who's holding it up? Well, I think the stock market is going sideways since the beginning of the year. It has come back lately, but we still have not gone back to the all-time highs. So looking at the chart, it's going nowhere. Theodore McIntosh, if there's an ultimate power structure to protect fiat money and global control, then Donald Trump would have to be in cahoots with them. How else would he have built so much? Well, that's true. There are stories that the Rothschilds saved one of his resort companies, and his Secretary of Commerce, Ross, was a Rothschild banker. But sometimes you need to have known the enemy and be close to the enemy to be able to fight the enemy. Who knows? But you see, I think the people who created the Federal Reserve, this is according to Anthony Sutton, and a lot of them are from the Skull and Bones, the establishment. They think that they're better. The elites are better than the general public, and that they need to be in charge. It's kind of the Hegelian dialectic, right? That the state is more important, and we are only cogs. But the way Donald Trump speaks, hopefully, when he made his inauguration speech, that it was not a change of party or. It was a change of power, right? He said, this, I'm giving power back to the people. The power is going away from Washington. So hopefully, that will be true. Maybe he has to go, the swamp is so deep for 100 years, and even before that, the elite, the establishment, they've corrupted the Constitution and the system so much that if he just tried on the first day to abolish the Federal Reserve, he probably would have not succeeded. So maybe he's going through other avenues. He has to maybe clean up the law enforcement part of the state, the Secret Services, CIA. So maybe that's why there's a fight there between him and Deep State. I don't know. But I think we need to, not only in the US, but in the UK, everywhere in the world, we need to keep exposing this corrupt fiat money system. because it only favors a few thousand people, and they control a lot of money. Just like Amschel Rothschild said in the 1800s, give me control of the money supply, and I care not who makes the laws. And if we're going to have truly representative government where the individual is sovereign, we can't have central banks. No way, no way we can have central banks. David Johnston, we all have serial numbers, which means we are owned. Yeah, there's talk about that, the birth certificate. Yeah, the same thing here in the UK. We are under maritime admiralty law, right? Instead of common law and the law of the land. That's how Europe operates, the EU. Michael Piotrowski, hi Mario. Prime Minister May on Friday afternoon said something about Chequers agreement on gold standard. Do you know about what that's all about? Well, yeah, I think you mentioned that earlier. I read her, what she said. She didn't really mean a gold standard like we know about, a monetary system. She was talking more a gold standard for the financial sector. But I don't think she meant a gold standard for the monetary system. If she had said we need to go back on a gold standard just like that, then it would have been big news. But she was talking more about the city of London and how they have to go back and with the EU that they have to make sure they're on a gold standard for the financial sector. But I don't think it was the monetary system. So it's ironic that she used that term to talk about the financial system, but I'm sure it's not going back to a gold standard, even though it would be great. Alex Killich. Hi, Mario. Can you explain how US dollars and treasuries will cause hyperinflation if they are dumped and flood back in the US? Can't the Fed write it off or withdraw from the economy? Of course, they can withdraw it from the economy, but then that would create a collapse of economic activity. The way it would create inflation and eventually hyperinflation would be that all the supply of dollars outside the United States would be coming in. It's the simple law of supply and demand, right? The supply increases, the demand decreases, the value goes down, right? And then once you have inflation and people start losing confidence in it, the demand decreases even quicker. And by demand, I mean people want to get rid of the dollars for real goods, and that's when you get hyperinflation. John Doe, Monaco, are governments manipulating the price change downward in gold and silver? Why the drop? Well, I think there are cycles in the markets, of course, but yeah, the bullion banks and the central banks, they always manipulate the price of gold, but it's also a two-sided coin. With the paper market, you also get speculators who don't think like us, who are not gold bugs, don't believe in sound money. They just come in and they buy gold on the paper market just for the price appreciation. And when it turns, they need to get out because they're leveraged, and it causes the price to drop. And that's what the central bankers and the bullion banks play on that, the greed of the speculator. And even people, I admit in the past, I did trade gold futures. I don't anymore. So that's how they that's why this game keeps happening. But yeah, one day, they will eventually run out. They won't have that much physical to play this game with. If they did, gold would still be $20.67 an ounce or $35 an ounce. Penn Meisters, Andrew Maguire, the real deal. I always get excited by his interviews. Never see the big stuff just around the corner. Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. But yeah, it's difficult. I think maybe the bullion banks and the people in the bullion market listen to him. He'll come out and say, "Oh, there's shortage in the market," which is probably true. And so they probably say, "Oh, no," the BIS will say, "Well, let's make sure that doesn't." They just go in, and they have access to the COMEX, the central banks and the BIS. So they just use the paper to manipulate the price lower. Zalatiki, will the banks and the U.S. in the U.S. are the biggest losers if gold price dropped? No, I mean, the gold price is already dropping. The gold price dropping like this is just a sign that the market, that things, a false sign in my opinion, that things are okay, but and that the banks are okay. So I'm not sure that is what it means. Savio Toronto, what is the impact of Russia liquidating U.S. Treasury holdings? Well, I just saw another story today that they liquidated even more in May, and they didn't really have that much. They liquidated maybe about 70 billion or something, maybe a little more, and it really led to a spike in the yields, which just goes to show that a lot of the movement we see is just derivatives and manipulated. It's not real paper, while the Russians actually took the 70 billion and sold the whole thing. And look how it moved the market. But the usual moves we see are hedge funds and investment banks and governments just playing the derivatives. They're not actually maybe buying 42 billion, right? They're just leveraged. But I suspect this is like real selling. I think the significance of it is that it shows that a small amount like 40 billion or 30 billion can have a big impact on the markets, and real money selling, you see. GBS 63, hi, from Canada, nice to see you. Theodore McIntosh, I like to hedge precious metals holdings with leveraged ETFs. Hold the real stuff and trade paper. Yeah, you can play that game with the ETFs. Why not? But you are helping perpetuate, the manipulation. I personally think that if we are gold bugs and we really believe in sound money, we should get out of the paper markets. But that's not for me to decide. That's for you to, if you're successful with it and you can actually take the profits from the paper game and buy physical, that's actually quite good. I'm not going to try to do that. I think it's not worth it. And I prefer doing what I'm doing here anyway. And anyway, Penmeister, Maneco 64, I like you because you're honest. Well, thank you. I think that's the most important thing, being honest. Sash Media 1, with gold down, what price would you add to your position? Yeah, that's a good question. I listened to an interview, and I recommend it. It's a recent interview. Greg Hunter interviewed, what's his name? He's a Cycles guy from Holland, and he thinks gold should bottom in the next couple of months. He has a key level at 1,212. He says if it holds that, good, but he said it could break that level and go lower, but he thinks we are almost at a bottom and he's not selling anymore. So I think time-wise, the next month or two is a good time to buy gold, according to the Cycles guy. Forgot his name now. What's his name? Charles Nenner. Sorry, Charles Nenner. Yeah, El Tomo. But he said, we're not selling anymore, but it could go lower. So, but we are near a bottom. And he has been saying this since the last 6-9 months, that gold would bottom in the summer, towards the end of the summer. So he has been right. So, and the other thing he says, he thinks the next, when we bottom now, we're going to have a new bull market. The bull market will resume because he considers this still a long-term bull market, and we're going to make a new high around 2,500 in the next 2 years. So, does it really matter if you buy it at 1,230 or 1,200? If it goes to 2,500? Not really. Residual currency, are SDRs backed by gold? No. SDRs are is fiat. SDR is just like a basket of the main IMF currencies: the dollar, sterling, Japanese yen, the euro, the Chinese yuan, Canadian dollar. It's just a basket, and they just create it out of thin air. It's not backed by anything. IMF does not use gold. IMF hates gold. Sajir Ashraf, Maneko, do you think there is going to be a global monetary reset in 2018? Well, there's so much speculation about that, isn't there? I mean, we have the Economist magazine cover from 1988 saying that, that will be a new world currency. And you got the phoenix rising from the ashes and the paper money below the phoenix burning. And it said 2018. It would be very interesting. I mean, we do need a global reset. I think everything is, we've got, as the system is not sustainable anymore. There's too much debt, and that's the nature of the fiat money system, that you need ever increasing debt, and then it comes to a point where it doesn't, you need a lot more debt to create $1 of GDP or growth. So yeah, maybe there will be a global reset, but of course they're not going to tell us, or maybe they did, and only people like us have, who are called the conspiracy theorists and everything, are looking at it. And maybe the general public, you'll be a big shock to them because they haven't bothered to do their homework, and they roll their eyes when we talk about these things to them. So that's too bad for them, even though we do try to tell people about it. Pat, currently the International Monetary Fund holds approximately 2,800 metric tons of gold specifically. Well, that's indirectly, I think. It's more from the member countries, but the IMF constitution actually does not allow countries to negotiate within the IMF with gold. They only go for the U.S. dollar, and maybe the U.S. dollar is king for the IMF. And the IMF try to keep the price of gold down in the late 70s. They just hoarded a lot of gold. Pat, I do agree that gold remains an important asset. That's why central banks hold it for the governments. But the IMF, they try not to put much importance into gold. I'm really not sure if the IMF gold it's actually gold from different countries within the IMF that put that gold there. I'm not sure. I think it might even be double counted. That's the other thing the IMF allows countries to do, even though even if they lease the gold out, all their gold out 10 times, they can still account for having that gold. So that's the IMF for you. The global, Mike TM, the global reset could be with Bitcoin as the world currency. Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe it's more the technology of the blockchain that will be used by the central banks. I don't know. Or maybe the cryptocurrencies will just be a safety valve for the people who are involved. Um, because I can't think of the central bankers wanting to have a decentralized monetary system. Do you? Or maybe they will have to, because their centralization has, uh, if we do have a reset, will be a proof that it doesn't work. So we'll have to see. I don't espouse to know everything. I just try to do things that feel right to me. And to me, ever since I bought my first gold coin and my first silver coins in 2002, it's felt like, well, this is worth something. This is real, right? That's why. And then I went in, and then I learned about money, the monetary system, because the only thing I knew about gold was that they closed the gold window in 1971, but I didn't really know the implications of it. And that's how I learned about it. El Tomo asks Mario, real estate in London is going down fast. Correction, or the pin out of the grenade? It could be the pin out of the grenade. I think it started going down a lot more, in central London, where it went up so much. It's definitely a bubble. But right now, interest rates are still really low here in the UK. So what's going to trigger? I think people are it's becoming less and less affordable. People are harder up. The cost of living is going up, and even though interest rates aren't going up, if they do, yeah, that could be the pin in the grenade. Theodore McIntosh. Oh, thanks, Theodore. I've yeah, I mean, I worked in the markets, for over 20 years. Uh, it didn't taught me a lot of the stuff that I know. The reason I know a lot of the stuff that I love reading, and I looked into it. Of course, I learned a lot from the markets and from dealing with people about money and bonds and stocks and everything. And that helped, in my education. But it's my books here, that have helped. That's the only way to learn, really, through reading, in my opinion. And also listening to other people. I've listened to thousands of videos of people talking about these subjects as well, and that's gone into my brain as well. That's helped. My TM, I have split my portfolio in three equal valued parts: cryptos, silver coins, and gold coins. Well, that seems like a good way to do it. I've got some cryptos and gold and silver, but I, my split is not like yours. But that's up to each individual, isn't it? Theodore McIntosh, have you read The Dictator's Handbook? No, I haven't. It sounds like an interesting book. I'll have to have a look. Michael Holiday, go long on grain. Well, I mean, I don't really want to get involved. To go long grain, I'd have to open an account with a commodities broker and deal with the CBOT. Do I really want to do that? Nah. I mean, but I'm not really into that. I don't think it's worth it. The counterpart party risk. But you could be right. I mean, commodities are very low. And I think Charles Nenner was saying today that he thinks we will have some kind of deflationary collapse for the next year or two, but that afterwards we'll have a hyperinflation. So, and I think he's right. Not too sure how long it will take, but all the money that's been created over the last 10 years or the last 50 years, It's just too much. It's not reality, right? So things have to rebalance. What about spread betting or CFDs for trading grain? Yeah, you can do that, of course. Here in the UK, you can spread bet, but yeah, yeah, why not? You could do that. Again, you're going to have counterparty risk. I remember a few years ago, one of the spread betting firms went bust. But yeah, if you're nimble, why not? Hi, Karen. Have you read Creature from Jekyll Island? Yeah, I have. Good book. G. Edward Griffin. I've read also Eustace Mullins' books. They're all very interesting. John Doe, like Trump's QE tax cuts, same as another QE. That's right. I mean, his tax cuts aren't funded. And don't get me wrong, I'm not for taxes. I'm for small government. I'm for the abolition of the IRS. But if you're going to cut taxes, you got to cut back government. And he's not doing that. The deficit now is budget deficit is almost 5%. So that's why the economy is doing well. It's not really, it's just a shot in the arm with heroin, really. It's not real growth. Loic Thierry, why did the SNB or Swiss National Bank why did they sell so much of their gold? Well, they sold half of their gold. I think it was a bit more than 2 years ago. Basically because they were politically pressured by the Americans and the IMF, you know. And what did they use to pressure the Swiss? Well, they started, having a go at them about what happened after World War II, that they took money from the Germans and from the Jews that fled Germany and didn't give it back. There's a big brouhaha, right? And they just pressured the Swiss to get rid of half their gold. That's why. And also, why did they pressure for them to get rid of their gold? Because you can't have a currency like the Swiss franc or any other currency be really sound in a world where the dollar and all the other fiat money currencies are not sound, right? Look at what's his name, Gaddafi, try to introduce a gold dinar for trade with sub-Saharan Africa. Look what happened to him. So that's why the Swiss sold their gold, not because they wanted to. Naughty UK, hi Lee, how are you doing? Nice to see you here. Peter Tenalia, thoughts on Russia selling almost all of its US bonds and US dollar getting stronger? Well, they sold their bonds in April and May, and the US dollar, I guess, is getting a little stronger in the last few months. But I saw a comment by someone about the dollar, watching the movement in the dollar uh, against other fiat currencies is like watching Jello move around. It doesn't really mean anything. They're all, in the end of the day, these are all paper currencies, and they will all end up, at the value that they are worth, which is zero in the end of the day. They become less and less, their purchasing power never goes up, always goes down because they're fiat, right? Rick W. Mary, do you also like to read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie? Funny you should say that. I remember my dad gave me that book when I was younger. I don't remember it too much. But yeah, that's an interesting book, I think, I do know that book. Andrea Dalty. Hi, got in late. Have you shared any thoughts about the Bitcoin boom? Well, it was yesterday. It just moved out of the blue, didn't it? Bitcoin. Um, and right now it's 7,500. That's good. I mean, I've also got EOS, and that's had been down and it's moved back up, backed up. Maybe it's just time. Don't know why it went up. Some uh, there's an old saying in the markets. So people a lot of times, because you get calls from clients or other brokers, they say, "Why is the market gone up?" And you say, and you try to find a reason. And sometimes the best thing to say is there were more potential buyers than sellers. And you need to say potential, because if you say there are more buyers than sellers, it doesn't make sense, because for every buyer there's a seller. So I would say, there's more potential buyers of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies right now than potential sellers. But are we out of the woods yet? I don't know. I think we need to get back above 10,000 to really, be out of this consolidation we've had since the end of last year, beginning of this year. So I hope that helps. Yeah, Naughty saying, I remember when this used to happen every day, the Bitcoin boom. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in the cryptocurrencies. It's not just Bitcoin, right? So I think people need to do their own homework, find a project that they like, and get involved, and you can make a lot of money very quickly. Of course, you can lose a lot of money very quickly. That's why you need to be nimble. Like the other day, I went into this new exchange. I bought. It's an exchange called Chains, CHINCE.com. They're going to focus on EOS assets, or EOS blockchain-based tokens. And I saw that I received some of their tokens. This exchange, the token is called CET, and I thought, this is the first exchange doing this kind of stuff for EOS tokens. So I actually bought some of the tokens from the exchange, and it doubled in a few days. And I got out. I got out early because it went up even more. But I did make a good profit on it, and I put it back in EOS. So there is a lot that you can do in the cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin. But of course, if Bitcoin goes up, it's like a rising tide raises all boats, so it helps. And some tokens will move more or less than others, or more or less than Bitcoin. John Doe, really, I think not. They have manipulated since 1917. London Gold Fix, they controlled the fiat side of gold trading. So yeah, I think the London Gold Fix was actually 1919. That's when it started. And I think the reason they had to do that is because prior to World War One, the world was on a gold standard, right? And when the war started, all the major warring countries in Europe went off gold. So after the war, they had to pretend that they were still in the gold standard, and that's why they had the fix, to try to manipulate the price, right? To control the price. Have you read The Golden Constant by Roy Jastrom? No, I haven't, PH2. I have to have a look. Charles Wilson, I make more money in the casino than the stock market. Well, I'm not really a gambler, like a casino gambler. I guess you could say the stock market, cryptocurrencies might be a little bit. It is like a casino, speculation. There's nothing wrong with speculation. I think in the world we live in, unfortunately, it's one of the ways we can earn a living. It's a symptom of the fiat money system. It's a system based on speculation, and we're part of it. And you have to be honest about it. We're not farmers. We're not small landowners, are we anymore? Maybe we should be prepared for that? I don't know. The way I prepare for that maybe is that I live a bit closer to the countryside than in central London, for example. Naughty UK Bitfinex said they're making an exchange on EOS. However, I don't think the TPS is ready for that. Yeah, you should check chains.com, Naughty. It's already fairly busy, that exchange. The only thing I find is that when I got out of the CET token, it was very hard to sell the EOS. If I wanted to sell some of the EOS for Bitcoin or Ethereum, to put it in my one of my Wirex cards. It was hard, so I had to send it to Bitfinex, the EOS, and sell it there. It's very liquid. The EOS tokens against EOS are very liquid, but not against Bitcoin and Ethereum. So, but I think chains could be, they're the first ones, so I think they could do well. Resonator, what is your recommendation if you have money in 401k account and can't take it out? Do you recommend buying GLD? I guess I don't like GLD or ETFs, but if you can't take it out, yeah, that's the next best thing. But yeah. PH2, why is flash trading not illegal? Well, the problem with the flash trading is like a result of electronic trading. It's very difficult to, and I've traded on real exchanges. Like I never worked on the floor of the futures exchanges. My colleagues did. I was more in the office talking to clients, and I used to call my colleagues on the floor. And when you have a floor and brokers on the floor and traders, there's no flash crash because it's humans, right? What happens with electronic trading is that someone might type in, 10,000 instead of 100, and that could just like hit all the bids below in the market and create the flash crash. So people, there are accidents, and of course there are people who abuse it, and it's very difficult to keep track of that. Very difficult because there's thousands of people trading all around the world, decentralized on screens. When there was an exchange, it was difficult to do. You couldn't, if the market was 10 bid at 11, you couldn't have someone give an order to sell down to 00, because everyone would look at you and say, "What are you talking? What are you doing?" Daryl Lowry, your thoughts on mainstream media saying to ignore the yield curve? Well, yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy the mainstream media, and I don't listen to it. The only reason why I know that they're saying that is because you told me. The mainstream media is just a propaganda mouthpiece for the fiat money system, for the bankers, for the central banks. So yeah, they don't want public perception. They don't want people, talking about things that might hurt them. And that's probably why. Naughty, London house markets do a correction. Brexit causing outside investors to pack up and leave. I know you're from London. What's your thoughts? Well, I think it's a mixture of things. Maybe some of the rich foreigners are not, they're skirting London. I think like the rich Russians as well don't want to be here anymore. But deep down, I think it's to do with interest rates. They've manipulated interest rates so they could keep house values up, because 2/3 of UK bank assets are housing related. But eventually, things turn. And yeah, they're going to blame something Brexit, the foreigners not buying, but in the end of the day, I think it's the credit cycle, and house prices are too overvalued because they've kept interest rates artificially low. Golden Oil, thank you for the donation on Super Chat. Straits of Hormuz closure on 11/4. Do you mean November the 4th? Screen cap this. So yeah, the Strait of Hormuz, for those of you who don't know, is the strait where you come out of the Persian Gulf, or the Iranians call it the Persian Gulf, right? It's where you come out of the Persian Gulf with the oil tankers into the Indian Ocean. It's a very strategic strait for oil. Is that because of when I guess that's when the sanctions take effect, right? Golden Oil for the against Iran. But so yeah, that we'll see. I mean, I think the Chinese are not respecting this sanction, so it could get heated. I'm sure the U.S. Navy will be there. Straits of Hormuz. Larry Dibble, if they're fixing the price of gold now, what would prevent them from doing that after a reset? Well, the purpose of a reset is to balance the books between sovereign countries, the monetary books. So if you do that and then you manipulate the price lower, what's the point of doing the reset, right? So the reset might be, let's say they decide to drive gold up to $5,000, and they decide, the powers that be, that there will be like a corridor. They won't let it go below 4,750, and they won't let it go above 5,250. They'll keep it in a band. So yeah, basically, yeah, the purpose, because they haven't done a reset in a long time. So if they do a reset, they would be defeating the purpose of a reset by then manipulating the price lower. The need for, if they do a reset, it means that they need to do it, right? So yeah, that's how I see it. Sash Media One, yeah, Brexit and blaming the crash on Brexit. Yeah, Brexit has been used as a scapegoat for a lot of. It's like a distraction. It's like, look over here, not over, towards the City of London, the bankers, the Bank of England, and the fact that we've been indebted. Not only us, but especially the young people. And it's a shame because a lot of the young people don't realize that they think Brexit and Donald Trump and the Conservative Party are to blame for this, but it's the bankers and both parties, Conservatives and Labor. They're to blame for the situation of the economy, not Brexit. Brexit is just a big scapegoat. It's the biggest scapegoat probably in the last, I don't know, since World War II. Golden Oil, has gold finally bottomed? Well, I listened to an interview that Greg Hunter did recently. You can go on his channel with Charles Nanner. Charles Nanner thinks gold is going to bottom in the next month or two. So, but it could go lower. Cycles wise, he thinks we're very near a bottom. Thanks, Havoc, for the thumbs up. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'll take another few questions. I've been here for an hour, so that's usually how long I do the live stream for. So I'll just take another few questions. Karen's Swiss Secrets. Gold price is manipulated as is silver. When will it stop? Well, it will stop when it suits them. When the price goes up, you can be sure that it will also be the bullion banks and the central banks who drive it higher when it suits them. So, they drove it up as well, in 2011. John Doe. Is silver a better value right now than gold with the price difference increasing? I have been buying silver. Seems to be a great sell. Yeah, I think silver will outperform, as I've said in the past. When the market turns, the precious metals begin going up again. Peter Tenalia, Obama. I guess you mean it's the ex-president said he was gonna cut the deficit in half, and he doubled it. And libtards applaud. Now they will blame Trump for the crash. One point about that. There is a difference between the deficit and the national debt. Obama did cut the budget deficit in half, but it was still a deficit. So the national debt is different. The deficit is how much you overspend every year, and the deficit becomes the debt, right? So Obama did cut the deficit in half, but the national debt still went up. I agree. Trump is doing just the same. Well, actually, Trump has doubled the deficit this year, and so the debt's still going to go up. I don't think you can blame the crash on any president. I think you blame the crash on the Federal Reserve and the people who run the monetary system, because they're the ones who pump and dump, right? Not me. Mario, thanks for the chat. Excellent as always. Thank you. I appreciate everyone who participated in the live stream. And Android Daisy, let's end the Fed, the Bank of England, and every other central bank. The thing is, if the Fed ends, I think all the other central banks will be powerless. If the U.S. goes back to the Constitution and makes gold and silver the only currency of of the land, then the other central bankers will have no future. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for showing up and your support. And yeah, take care, everyone. Goodbye.